I was reflecting on the airplane back from Virginia Beach. When was the last time, and I was just asking myself, when was the last time we went to a continuing education seminar that wasn't offered at our gym? Like, we didn't bring people in to do it and then sit through it, where we actually attended in some other facilities, some other thing that we were invited to or signed up for. Because I can't remember.
I want to say it was the National Athletic Trainers Association conference, perhaps in Vegas prior to 2017. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, we have at least 2 to 3 continuing education opportunities at Red Dot every single year. And then obviously there's a little bit of a gap there with, there's at least a 1-year gap with COVID when that happened. But the point of this is we used to go regularly. Yeah, regularly, at least once a quarter. And we would try to find, there was other local things that we could try to get to. Being in the Bay Area, things would come through. So this was the first time we got out. We just got back from Virginia Beach, just for those people listening, in Norfolk, Virginia. We attended the basically it was a seminar it was focused towards human performance, just say on a broad scale, for the tactical operator. And for people that don't know what that is, maybe you come to the show just for the fitness side. You're not looking or listening to the After Dark side. We should kind of talk about what that means. And I'll define that, I think, in kind of layman's terms here in a second, or at least what I think it means in a second. But we're basically talking about strength and conditioning, as well as the other components that go into maximizing your strength and conditioning program and your ultimate performance in whatever the job that you have is as an athlete. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, it's somebody that, generally speaking, works behind a gun, or it could also mean firefighters,
first responders.
First responder of some level that doesn't carry a firearm as part of their job. But just with the whole tactical thing, what does that mean? It's that term just gets used a lot. And I just think, kind of in layman's terms, to break it down, just because you carry a gun doesn't mean you're tactical. Shooting actually is not tactical by nature, and nothing about shooting is typically tactical. It's what you do, what you're doing, or how you go about solving a problem that you might be faced with. And yes, you might have a gun. So, for people that watch a lot of TV or a lot of movies or whatever, what you see with guys moving through rooms, entering structures, in and around vehicles, how our warfighters may be approaching a problem, that they have to use a helicopter to get to, and then they have to insert in certain areas that are very hard to insert into, and they're trying to do this under the cover of night and using things like night vision and being very covert in their operation, and then have to do whatever it is that they need to do to complete the mission while they're there, and then all the reverse of that, getting back and getting out of that situation. All of those things are the tactics that get used in order to make that operation successful. And success would be whatever it is to complete the mission and bringing everybody back, safe and sound. That's what tactical means in this sense. And I think that's I'm probably pretty safe in saying that. And even, there's going to be some internet trolls out there that might want to argue that with me. But I think my friends that are closely involved in that world would say, yeah, man, that's a pretty good job. So I'm gonna go with that. So when we were sitting down, we're talking about the human performance around these people. There's a couple things to keep in mind, and as we go through this talk, and the reason I wanted to bring this talk up is there's several reasons. One, and I think one of the major standouts in terms of the takeaways that I got from our trip and through the 3 days that we spent there, was that we're still talking about humans.
Mm-hmm. Human performance.
Human performance at the end of this. Physiology, there's anatomy, there's biomechanics, there's neurology, and there's all of those things never change. They never change whether you're the couch potato or you're the tier 1 operator. Tier 1, for people that aren't listening, these are the people that work at the tip of the spear. These are your top level people out there in these military or government or other agency units that handle shit that you don't want to know about most of the time. And
or don't know about.
Don't know about. Yeah. There's a lot of stories written, a lot of books written, a lot of movies made. You may get the gist, but these are people that are operating sort of in the black. You're not going to know about it unless you're sort of on the inside or you know these people. And a lot of the times I don't think you really want to know. A lot of the job is not glamorous, as if you spend time around that community at all. There is a lot of non-glamorous stuff, but some of the common things about these humans that I've picked up at the top level they are extremely driven, very driven.
They're intense. They have a certain intensity about them.
That's like an understatement, right? So, I mean, we could talk about that a little bit. I've had Jeff Nichols, who is a human performance specialist and exercise physiologist, strength and conditioning coach, got a lot of sort of labels next to his name. He and his wife, Katherine, out of Performance First in Virginia Beach, they specialize in this population. This is what they do. And more specifically, they are specializing in preparing people to be at the top level or get into and stay at the top level in these spaces. Jeff's got an extensive career in naval special warfare as a SEAL with the U.S. Navy. Did a lot of things there for a lot of years. We had him on the show to talk about his business, but also talk about a lot of other things. If you go back, you want to dial back, it's the Jeff Nichols episode. The point of that is the intensity. I mean, it's palpable.
It is, definitely. I have to say, as far as Jeff and being at this seminar this past weekend, the energy that was in that facility, not just brought by him, but by the guest speakers, it was something else. And I really appreciated it. He really reminds me of what it's like to be in the strength and conditioning field back in the days when I was involved with collegiate athletics. And that was just really exciting for me because I haven't been around it in a very long time. And it was rejuvenating, I have to say.
Yeah, there was a whole cast of characters, and we'll talk about that. And, I think the reason I wanted to talk about this on the show today is because I think people would be curious, like, what does this mean? It's sort of an obscure, niche market, if you will. But the reality of it is, again, these are human beings, and they just need to perform a certain job at a certain level. And that certain job has a lot of aspects to it. So if you're comparing it to the athlete or the top level, Division I or professional athlete, just like in athletics, you have a game, you have a sport, let's just say. Everybody needs to perform on a team in order, let's say team sport. They need to perform at their job at the optimum level, and they need to do it in a way that puts the team in the best position to win, right? So, if you look at football as an example, like there are many different positions that make up the offense, and there's many different positions that make up the defense. There are different skill sets, different specializations that each one of these people need to be able to perform in order for that team to be operating the game plan and executing the game plan at the level it needs to be so that ultimately they win. That's
a great microcosm to compare to the tactical population.
I think, and then with that, obviously, like if I'm a offensive guard, I'm this huge lineman, maybe close or more than 300 pounds, and my job is to take on other 300 pounders so that they don't go crush my 220 pound quarterback, highly paid quarterback who is, basically running the show for the offense. I'm going to be training a hell of a lot different physically than the guy who's running routes to catch the ball that the quarterback is throwing to him. It's just different. And I think people can easily wrap their heads around that. Similarly, in these tactical spaces, you have different people that do different jobs. But the difference here is those skill sets that they're being trained for, job-specific opportunities, they need to know all of them for everybody, much like on another team, so you understand how the thing works. However, it doesn't get as specialized with the actual, performance training. I think while I'm going to be doing theoretically speed training as an offensive guard, I'm also going to be doing speed training as a wide receiver. I'm just going to be doing it in a much different way. I have a much different job description. But when you start getting into these tactical spaces, everybody has a very similar job description. However, their needs are sometimes very, very different because they're, just like on the football team, very, very individual. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. I'm just bringing it up because, again, a lot of people are asking me. It's like, hey, dude, how was it out there? And the first thing that comes up is like the room we were in was much different than the room that we're in at home or anywhere else with regard to the individuals we were surrounded by. Intensity is the first thing that comes to mind for me. I think the other thing that comes to mind for me is commitment, and the commitment to make sure that everything that they do and they provide, these coaches, we'll talk more about them later, like I said, but everything that they do, everything that they say, they recognize could have massive downstream impacts on the individual that they're giving this information to or training, up to and including death.
Yep, exactly. This is life or death. We're not talking about winning on a sports team. We're talking about life or death.
Yeah, so the commitment to excellence there and the commitment to doing the right thing was, unmatched. And so I'm going to compare and contrast these things here in a second. That was another thing that came up for me in that room, just kind of looking around at the group. And so with the group, we had these amazing instructors that were there, but there were also other people there. The cast of characters that were there. There were some people that are currently involved in Jeff and Katherine Grimm, Jeff's wife, their program out there at Performance First in Virginia Beach. They prepare people for the selection process to get into things like BUDS, which is that Navy SEAL selection process. It goes beyond BUDS for those people that know that thing. I'm not trying to say I know everything about it, but BUDS is kind of the first stage. They are training people to get into Army Ranger, Army Special Forces, or Special Operations, selection process. Some law enforcement has selection processes. Yes, there's the academy, but the guys that we were around were the tier 1 guys, the team guys. There were SWAT guys, special operations within law enforcement, and there was actually a guy there who's in the fire service. He's a firefighter, but he's also a special operator, and he's currently in the reserves, and he's about to be deployed.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so we had those guys. Going back to the people that are currently enrolled in the program, one of the things that struck me was how young they are.
I know, right? So, I mean, there were, I think some men that were 20, right? They're up to 50, I think, in the
group
room.
Yeah, in the group. Yeah, the guys that are currently involved in the program, these let's just call them participants, students, candidates, maybe is a better word of looking at it. Yeah, these are young guys that were very, very. The other trait I would say, we talked about intensity, talked about commitment. Another thing that comes up for me is focus.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, during those talks by the guest speakers, the audience, the candidates, they were dialed in. There was one speaker, she was speaking for 2.5 hours, Dr. Rebecca Ivory, and everybody in the room was captivated by her. And I mean, that's a huge deal. Granted, she's also a professor at the University of Washington. And, professors run the gamut as far as, you have some that are in the classroom and they just are strict lecture, but she did a lot of lecture, but everything that she had to say, everybody was listening to every word that was coming out of her mouth. I thought she did an amazing job.
Yeah, I think for one of the things to add to this is all those people were in the right room. And that's that. And it's no surprise, because I think of the gatekeeping process that it took to actually get into that room. Also around the room were other coaches. My friend Chris Curris from down in South Florida was there. He's a law enforcement officer and is in charge of some teams down there. But he was also, like Jeff, prior to going into service, he was a strength and conditioning coach at the university level, just like Jeff was, and they had been connected through the strength and conditioning world, and then obviously, there's the law enforcement piece to that came along. But I think the roots of that come from the strength and conditioning world. So he had invited Chris up to be part of sort of the coaching or delivery of the information when it came to the practical application. I actually got an opportunity. I've had Chris on the show before, and actually had an opportunity to sit down with him and have some really cool dialogue with him about some other things this time when we were out. That was recorded and will be out on a podcast soon. So that was sort of the general crowd that was there. I mean, there was a Navy recruiter there who is in charge of talking to these young men and putting.
He's also a chief too.
And he's a chief.
Right?
Yep,
Dive chief or something.
He's in charge of giving these guys the real story about what it's like what they need to be prepared for, and he. Who better to find out what they should be prepared for, because this guy's not an operator, than to go to the source or the resources that we were in front of to learn a bit more about it. So, I feel like there were a few other people in there that I may be leaving out that were there for their own reasons, not necessarily to go through the selection process, but to be able to understand the things fundamentally that you're going to need to do to be successful. And I think that where that comes from, or why we were there, is the extraordinarily high success rate that Jeff and his wife have with getting people through that selection process. If you go through their programming and their program, which is well beyond lifting weights, we'll touch on that. Going back to the human performance piece, your chances of making it through, not just making it through, but doing that at an exceedingly well level or good level, and coming out healthy the other side, and be able to learn and not just suffer, which you're going to do, right, in these processes, and be in a position to really perform rather than just get through. They have a very good track record.
Yes. But Jeff will also be the first one to tell you that when you come to them, you better be ready to go.
Yep.
Because he does an assessment with everybody that's coming in, and he was straightforward as far as this person is not going to make it, or this person has a chance to possibly make it. But I mean, he'll be forward with you as far as, coming into camp or their program, you better come ready.
Yeah, and he's done a lot of other things. So I'm just looking at this again. Why do people want to listen to this? Because I think there's a lot of similarities, right? Again, we're talking human performance. This guy's running a very, very solid outfit, and he provides pre-programming for you to get in. You don't have to necessarily go to these. Basically, they call them classes, if you will. They'll go 6 weeks. You'll go and you'll be there every day. You'll be training, you'll be in there every day doing something, not necessarily with lifting weights. There's a lot of other components to this, but you'll be there every day for 6 weeks and you'll leave there very, very prepared. But yeah, there's a selection process there just to get in. And so again, there was a selection process to even be invited to be there, to be standing in this room. And I felt very privileged to do that. And again, these character traits, are no surprise when you talk about, just about as transparent as they come, right? And he's going to tell you, and he's not going to, there's not going to be any feelings involved there. He's just going to tell you what's up.
He's refreshing.
Yeah, totally. So that's just kind of the overview, who we were around. The next thing that kind of popped in was like, what were we handling, and how do people relate to this? Well, again, we're talking about humans. So it probably doesn't surprise you when we're talking about performing at the very, very top level, that, obviously your health and your fitness is very holistic. You should be approaching it, I guess, in a holistic way. You can't do one without the other. We talked, obviously, the physical training piece, and there's a lot of components to that. We'll touch on those, but there's a nutrition component. And we went into depth there in a couple of different ways. And then there was a psychological component, just called mental health psychological component. And then there was also, dare I say, a spiritual component, but also I think it would be maybe more metabolized by the general listener as an awareness component, and sort of a self-awareness component as it relates to your mindfulness. And that'll come into play here in a second. I think we can explain that a little bit better, because people are probably listening going, wait, Navy SEALs, fucking mindfulness, what's that shit? Yeah, there's a huge component to this. And it has a lot more to do with than just, feeling good. There is a huge health component to this as well, as we got into it. So next step was, we got to listen to some amazing speakers. first up when we arrived was we got into the nutrition talk.
Susan Lopez, right? The tactical dietitian.
Yeah, tactical dietitian. So anybody that works in this space, again, people are maybe going, oh, that word tactical keeps coming up. I think you have to differentiate here. And she does, very, very specifically. Part of that is her background. She's a registered dietitian.
Yes, but also a veteran.
And she's married to a currently active operator. So she has some real world experience. And at least that's my understanding.
As far as who her partner is, I'm not sure. I didn't get that, but I can tell you that some of the registered dietitians that we've come into, I guess, contact with or have interacted with or have heard about. It seems like sometimes there's a disconnect between...
Sometimes?
Okay, I was trying to be nice here. There's a disconnect as far as the physically active population or an athlete versus the general population. But Susan is freaking dialed in. Yeah. I mean, she was talking about apples and apples, not apples and oranges here. And so I got really excited listening to her because the things that she was saying was resonating with me, with what we tell our clients and the people that we've interacted with who have come to us for services when it comes to nutrition. I don't think that there was a thing that she said that I disagreed with. Actually, it was very reaffirming and validating as to who we are and the message that we share with individuals. I thought she did a great job with the audience. And she talked about everything from the type of diet, macronutrients, vitamins and minerals, gut health, and microbiome. I mean, she touched so many aspects that are so important to be able to, for those operators or for anybody in that space that needs to have plenty of energy, be hydrated, and be able to think at the top of their game.
Yeah, I think that's the basic human being, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that was the thing. The nuance comes in with who you're actually working with and what they're actually doing on the job and all the things that can impact that. So yeah, I mean, you'd expect, we got to talk macros. We got to talk hydration. We got to talk micro and micronutrients and then the other components that come along with that. And with regard to what are we doing to mitigate our stress and make sure we get enough sleep and how nutrition can impact that and how that impacts the gut biome and gut health and how, disrupting that gut biome can wreak havoc on the rest of the system, which again, just from a consequence perspective for the people that we're working with on maybe on a more regular basis, the people that most people deal with on a regular daily basis in the health and fitness business. Okay, the downside to not managing that stuff is not feeling good and not performing your best with very little consequence except for your health. In this case, if you can't perform at your best, you could get yourself killed, and that is a very, I don't think it's a stretch, but obviously that's very extreme.
Or someone else.
Or you get somebody else killed.
Yeah.
You can't do your job. In the game on the football field, it means missing a play, missing a pass, letting a guy get by you, a quarterback gets sacked is, my analogy from before, my compare and contrast. In this case, there really is no room to make a mistake. It's very unforgiving in the most ultimate way. And so again, I think that had a lot to do with, how tied in everybody else was to making sure they were taking in all this information because they understand the ultimate consequences.
The gravity of everything.
Yeah, the gravity that could be there. But at the same time, it's just like, hey, this is the same shit we tell people or we're trying to tell and educate people on every day. And I think that's the bigger word is it's not telling, it's educating. It's trying to bring this stuff to the table so you can know it now and start addressing it now versus when you're not performing at your best or something happens and now you're forced to do it. You're not reacting to it. You're being proactive in it. Some of the nuance there was, obviously around hydration and electrolyte balance, the gut biome and how these guys can sometimes struggle to get in, the proper nutrients at certain times, or just some of their really bad behaviors. And it's interesting, like, some common themes that come up are like, how many monsters a day are these guys drinking? The tobacco use, and, it's not necessarily smoking, it's dipping, all those kind of things, and the alcohol, that gets consumed, and that's part of the culture. And, the not sleeping, that's also part of the culture. And it comes along with a lot of other things which we can talk about when we talk about the mental and psychological components of this later. But she really addressed all of those things, and I'm listening to it going, it's not unlike most of the people we're dealing with. Like, you drink too much fucking coffee, right? You eat more carbohydrate than you need. You're not eating enough protein, right? You're doing these things or putting these things in your system that could be disrupting that gut, right? You're doing well 5 days a week, but there's 2 days a week where you're falling completely off the wagon. So again, it was like, these are not like concepts that are completely foreign to anybody else. And I really wanted to make this point, especially when we get into the physical training piece, really want to make this point. Like, these are humans, and they have the same challenges that anybody else has that may or may not be in that space.
Yes.
It's 100%. And so it was really kind of, like you said, reaffirming or just validating to know that, look, you don't have to overcomplicate this shit, and there's no secret formula. There really isn't a secret formula to this. It's the same, really, again, without going too far down the line, it's the same shit we talk about on this show all the time.
Foundational stuff,
it's foundational stuff. And if something's not working right, generally you got to go check back on one of those foundations. So there were a lot of good questions that came up through there. There was a lot of very specific stuff. You can imagine some of those candidates, those young guys, had some very, very specific questions, supplements and things like that, which will come up in a minute. How to manage, and then some of the more seasoned guys were, how do I coach my guys to do a better job with managing some of these things throughout the day? How do I be a better coach or example to the guys that I'm working with to get them to come on board? And here's another thing that was a common theme, is that the people that were in this room, they were there because they wanted to be. So like I talk about on with other people on the After Dark episodes a lot about who these top level guys prefer to work with, these top level coaches. And to the man, to the guest, they will tell you, I want to work with the people that want to be here. And that's generally people that have skin in the game. They've paid to be there, right? They've taken time that's on their dime and their time to be there. And so if you're in that room, it's because you're looking for the edge, or you care that much, right? And you're wanting to help other people, and you're wanting to see other people succeed or not make the same mistakes that you made. But at the same time, to the guest, to the person in the room that was the more senior, let's just say leader, or coming from some level of experience, they will tell you that how frustrated they are that they can't get other people to adopt these basic foundational or fundamental things now, knowing how much better they could potentially be or perform, or how much better they may feel if they did.
I think that's part of Jeff's philosophy too, though, is to try to get the younger individuals to adopt this practice or become more aware and more, what's the word I'm looking for? An advocate or responsible. Thank you. Yeah, responsible. So that they can affect change later on. So some of the conversation that I had overheard was, it's really challenging with leadership and so on and so forth. But I think his general philosophy is, let's get them while they're younger and moldable, get them thinking about this, taking personal responsibility. And then as you get more and more of them in, then that'll create a ladder up.
I mean,
because they'll get promoted and stuff eventually.
You use the word microcosm. I mean, it's a microcosm for what our society should be doing right now anyway, as it relates to health and fitness, or just health and longevity, is we have to start teaching the younger group or the younger generation what this stuff is, what it means to them, help them understand why it should be important now, and get them to take as much of it as they can into their journey with them, so that when it comes up at some point, they can reflect back. They may not be addressing it, 100% now, but it will come. Well, they knowing with the wisdom that, that let's say some of the older generation has and can be that can be applied to these different scenarios and different, individual, I guess, individual instances. Hey, take this information and start applying it now. Practice it now, because it takes that practice. Don't do what I did. Don't have to go back and figure it out later or make the same mistakes that I've made. And again, the personal responsibility piece was a huge part of this. Don't expect somebody else to do it for you. Again, you listen to the other shows. The common theme, or a lot of things we hear this being, like our law enforcement officers being beat up in I guess in the court of public opinion about, they don't shoot well enough. They don't go hands-on well enough. Their combatives are lacking, right? They're out of shape. They're fat. They can't, their tactics suck, like they could be so much better if they did this. The bottom line is the government is not going to provide that training for them. I mean, who's going to pay for that, number one? Like you're paying, you're going to pay more? You want to pay more taxes for this? Probably not. But if you're the one complaining, the point of it is they're trying to make a difference here. And the younger generation are the ones that are ultimately going to make the difference, I think. And going back to Jeff's philosophy, and his mission is like, let's get this groundswell from the bottom up, so that at some point, right, these people become leaders. And if we can keep pushing, this narrative rather than this other narrative along the way, eventually these people will be leaders, and the gap will be filled in the middle, and we can start affecting change at the very, very top. And so, this is call it a metaphor for where we are in life, as society. This is what we should be doing with our kids, with our children, with their younger generation. And to me, again, like looking around in the room, just going, fuck, I'm more than twice the age.
Their age, I know.
Of these guys in here. And some of which are, active duty that had time off to be there. Or reservists that have time to be there. They're waiting for the next step. Yeah.
I have to say, I want to do a shout out to, I won't say his name, but Chief, that's a Navy recruiter. He was there, and he's a person in a position, a leadership position. And he was there because one of his guys had attended Jeff and Katherine's Performance First Tactical seminar, went back, told him about it, and Chief wanted to know more. Right. And so I feel like he's been there more than once to this seminar.
I think there was a conversation, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that happened, but I don't know how many times he'd been there.
But kudos to him for listening to a subordinate or a candidate, and then going out and experiencing this and seeing what it's all about. And he seemed like a huge advocate for this program. Yeah, I mean,
he's trying to be that guy to make change. So anyhow, in terms of being change agents and affecting that. You mentioned Susan Lopez in terms of the dietetics piece. Again, for some people, most of that information was probably mind blowing, and then for some of us that have been in the business a long time, was just very reassuring, reaffirming, and there was some nuance in there. I was like, oh, that's very interesting that we, this has maybe changed a little bit, or this has tweaked a little bit, or understanding how in application with this particular population where she had some successes or where those challenges lie with other people. So it's really good to be around veteran coaches. So certainly encourage anyone that's in the fitness space for that matter, but certainly in this world of if you're an operator, you work with operators, or you're in the world of law enforcement, you're a first responder, follow Susan Lopez, tactical dietitian on Instagram. She's amazing. I mentioned this before, and just like we talk about sort of our pillars and our EAT squared plus E acronym there. Eat real food, get your adequate micro and macronutrients. There's a T in there. We've played around. We've gone back and forth. It kind of means two things. I changed it out of targeted supplementation into type of diet because there's so many diet tribes, and I felt like we had to handle that because people wanted to go to the supplements. I'm like, well, let's talk about some other stuff because this is going to be more important. But in this case, we talked about the importance of supplementation, and specifically targeted supplementation with Tom, and I'm gonna butcher his last name here.
Pazdernik?
Yeah, Pazdernik from Thorne. And Thorne is basically a dietary supplementation company. They've been in the game for a long, long time. One of their, the big thing with them is the quality of what they're putting out and how they're doing it is top notch, and it's under a high level of scrutiny because they basically, like, if you're the USOC, that'd be the U.S. Olympic Committee, World Anti-Doping Agency, the U.S. military, law enforcement, the NC2A, like they have a very, very specific list of things that you can and can't get or can't have or put in your body. And they go through a very high level of inspection to make sure that they can confidently provide these products to these types of organizations and nobody's going to get in trouble. And obviously they stay healthy. So they also have a lot of people within these spaces, whether it be athletics or in the military, space. Again, keep using the word tactical. I hesitate with it, but in, let's say, the tactical space that they work with on a regular basis to make sure they're staying relevant in what they're putting out. This company is very robust. Blood testing. They have consultations that you can get. They work with.
They do DNA testing as well.
You name it, they do it if it's relevant, and they have some formulations as well as some standalone things that you would expect to help people get and onboard the things that, like Susan was talking about, tend to be deficient, and we need to make sure we're again targeting in order to optimize performance and health. I mentioned the electrolyte thing as an example, but there's a lot of things that went into this. And this guy, Tom's an interesting cat. He actually deals directly with Naval Special Warfare and that whole team of exercise physiologists, dietitians. They have. I mean, you're talking about guys with the biggest budgets in the world that have all the resources available to them. Tom deals directly with those guys, and so he's on the front line and getting the feedback and staying relevant. Like, what do they need? Where are they being challenged? And with that, what are the limitations in what we can give them? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that, while is completely safe, and there's a direct science that backs up what the efficacy of it. And what the quote unquote gains you can get from the advantage you get by using certain supplements, they're not available or they're not approved. Let's just say. So how do we make the most of this? My big takeaway from Tom was just that his connection to what the realities of it are.
Yes,
he wasn't trying to sell anything. He didn't have to, because it wasn't like there's this one product that we give people that makes them the ultimate operator, or something like that. It was like, hey, you need more magnesium. You need more zinc, right? We need to manage the adrenal function. We need to
HPA axis.
HPA axis. These are things that are well developed in science, right? Like these are not secrets. There's nothing special about a special operator when it comes to their nutrition and their fitness and their health and mindset or health. Mindset is a little bit different. Mental health is a little bit different. There's a lot of things that go into that. But as far as, being a human being, they need the same stuff the rest of us do. Yeah. That was kind of my big takeaway going, I guess we always kind of put them in this other silo, these individuals, but at the same time, like, I don't know why I did that. It was just, again, going back to reaffirming.
I think when I think about this population, I think about them as being superhuman. They're humans, but they just take on more stress. Their occupation is more physically active. I think that they're just more intense, that profession. So that's probably why I silo them as different.
Yeah, same.
But at the grassroots or the basics, they're the same.
Yeah, and at the same time, like, there's different levels, right? And that's not to take away from there's levels and everything. That's not to take away from all the different things that happen. Like, you look at the military in general, it's a massive machine, right? Massive machine. There's from cooks to truck drivers to mechanics to pilots, to logistics officers, to all kinds of different things, right? This is just one segment of that population. You look at law enforcement, right? More people are beat cops than anything else, right? There, how many guys are on a SWAT team, right? It's very, very few. I mean, I met with a couple of the leaders from the local SWAT teams while we were out there, had some dinner one night, whatever. You're talking like 16, 18 guys total out of a department of like 800 people. That's not a lot of people. So it is special or isolated, I guess, within that level. But they're there because of the additional attributes that they have and that they can bring to the table. One of which is their physical ability, as well as their psychological and mental ability to deal with the things that you just suggested there. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that the beat cop or that the guy at the firehouse doesn't experience the same things. They may just not experience those things at the same frequency and or intensity, or, I guess intensity, or even I think frequency is probably the right term. But their needs are the same. Their needs are the same. It's just these guys have a little bit more to deal with on this end. And that little bit more, like as they say, the poison is in the dose, because they get so many doses of it. They need to be really, really careful, and they need to make sure, just like anybody else, they're managing this shit. So again, bringing this stuff to the table. So Tom dug down into a few things, but for those people that are in the supplement game, or even listen to this podcast, like I'm telling you, there wasn't anything there that was completely mind blowing. It was just like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Or, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't ever heard that before, or it's interesting to hear that confirmed. Maybe that was kind of assumed, but no, here's some data, here's some research, here's what we know. And they are at the tip of the spear there. They have all of that stuff, again, because they are dealing directly with these people, these doctors, these physicians, these physical therapists, these chiropractors, these dietitians, all of these people that work directly with these operators, or people that are in an operational space, again, first responders included. He's dealing directly with those guys. So as a company, the way that company is structured, they can pivot very fast to accommodate a need. That was impressive to me. This is not like your big supplement company that's, trying to supply people with just protein powder and creatine, and aminos. They have all that stuff. Yeah. But they're filling very, very specific demand. He was an impressive guy. And I'm encouraged to talk to him a little bit more. As a matter of fact, I got a phone call with him this week, because I think, and this was a hope that we could get connected, because I'd like to be basically supplying people those products out of Red Dot Fitness. They are that good. I would definitely stand behind them.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm stoked about that. All right, so that kind of comes as a nutrition piece. What was next? What do we handle next?
We
got movement going.
Movement. Yeah, Jeff.
Yep. Yeah. So exercise program.
I think each day we did some.
We did a little bit of everything each day. Yeah.
Right?
So movement, exercise programming for the operator. I think people think, and this is the reason I wanted to connect with Jeff originally, because when I entered into sort of this trying to understand the world of exercise programming for our first responders, and maybe even those that are military level, I was looking out there and I was going, so what's available to these guys? What are they being provided? How much does their departments, or their agencies provide them in terms of exercise programming and direction? And how much of it, and what are they getting on their own, and who they have to go to it, or go to it for? What are they purchasing? What are they consuming? And social media is a great place to start. To just kind of see what's going on out there, and sort of on the private sector, like what's being, who's providing what to who. And then obviously doing some research and digging down with some people that I know, and interact with in the space. Like, what are you getting from your department? What's provided? Do you have a gym? Do you get instruction? Are there allied health professionals on staff, that you can deal directly with? What happens if you get hurt? What happens if you need nutritional advice? Where do you go for all these things? Man, I think I assumed that there would be more resources available, but what I quickly found was that's just not the case. And so that was telling from the inside. The second, and when I started to talk to people a little bit more about what exactly are they doing from their fitness program, I recognized there was a major gap there. So again, going back to, okay, well, who's providing these guys something else? Who's got a business around, giving these guys programming? And what I found was a little alarming. Oftentimes it was a guy propping up a resume, standing behind a beret or a badge, or some type of an insignia, saying, and they're on his website or they're on his Instagram page with the shirt off, providing this exercise template saying this is the answer. And, part of it is running around on a firearms range, wearing kit and, wearing their uniform or whatever it is that they're doing, and then providing this person like, here's the plan to get you fit. And if you're an officer, if you're a law enforcement officer, this is the thing. There was a lot of missing pieces to that. And I was like, first thing you're asking is like, well, what qualifies you to be able to provide this programming? Yes, you have experience in the trade of law enforcement, and maybe you're a fit person or whatever, but what puts you in a position to be able to do this outside of your really great marketing here? And that's not to say that all these programs are bad. Mm-hmm. And when I say bad, I mean like that there was no validity, there was no
there's no science
legitimacy to it. I just didn't see it really being organized well or backed up well. And spending enough time around human performance and strength and conditioning rooms, around teams, college athletes, and even in the professional ranks, I was just looking at it going, this is a little wild, this is a little wacky, but where else are you going to go, right? What are you going to do? You're going to go down to the local 24-hour fitness and take a class, or hire a trainer down at 24-hour fitness, or whatever lifetime as a law enforcement officer? I don't want to do that because that would make me look weak, or this person couldn't possibly understand my job. So I get it. Like, I understand that, but that was like a concern for me. I'm like, there's got to be somebody better. And so as I started searching around, I started to find people, and Jeff was one of those people. I was like, now here's a dude who gets it. This guy comes from the world of human performance, strength and conditioning.
That was his foundation.
That was his foundation before he was ever in, the military. And, as a result, he was at the Naval Special Warfare, at the command, working with the staff there on the human performance programming for the guys. So for the teams, my point of this is there is a big difference between getting an okay program and getting one that's got longevity, that is rooted in serious science and experience. Now, the meathead approach works. It does. Like, you can go in there and lift heavy weights and
for so long.
You can build muscle. Like, sometimes be the hammer. I get it. Like, I've been there. Trust me. I've done that myself. I was even that way as a coach when I was very young in the business. But everybody has specific needs.
Exactly.
That's an important part to understand. And you need to help them understand those so that they're picking the right program for them. Maybe your program isn't the right program for them. But if you're marketing it as this is the way, right, without taking those things into consideration, then it's already a red flag for me. Jeff was doing a little bit differently. And then also he was being very specific about who he was talking to and how he was talking to them. You need to get through a very, very specific criteria in order to be in the operational world, right? There are very specific criteria in terms of exercise testing, times, that you have to meet and things like that. And when you start getting into those kind of specifics, it's not general physical preparedness anymore. We are talking very, very specific exercise programming. And what I saw Jeff putting out really impressed me. And so I started asking around to other people in the space, that know, like, hey, what do you know about this guy? Like, fucking dude's on his game. That's what I'm getting. I'm just checking with you because you're in that space. And I just want to know because I'm trying to make some sense of all of this. Anyhow, I'm telling the story only because, not just because he impressed me, but because he backs his shit up. And when you listen to him, when you see it, and if you're in this world, you get it right away. Like, yes, this is a strength and conditioning coach. Whether he's strengthening for a baseball player, a volleyball athlete, a cheerleader, for God's sakes, all the way up to these tier 1 operators, he is going to be able to figure out this programming for you. And he's figured out a way to deliver it to a larger population of people. And I don't want to say the masses because it's not for the masses, but it is very, very well done for this very specific population. If you wanted to work with him one-on-one or whatever, I don't even think he's even doing that anymore. But
I don't think so.
He's helped some world-class athletes and worked with a lot of world-class athletes. So my point is like when we got there, first off, you walk into this facility and you're like, it's like walking into heaven, right? It's just all the toys,
top notch,
all the heavy duty stuff, for building max levels of strength and power,
and speed,
as well as speed, agility, quickness, mobility, all of that stuff. So if you know, walking into a top level strength conditioning room, and there's also a vibe, and there's also like a kind of an aura. You're walking on, all right, this is where the business happens. This is not a hobby. And, so as we started to get into the, some of the more specifics about exercise programming, I think there were some things that popped right out for me. One of which was, it's just exercise programming at the end of the day, right? It's squatting, it's hinging.
It's the foundational movement patterns.
It's pushing, it's pulling,
right?
it's rotation, it's extension, it's decelerating and accelerating forces. It's all the basic stuff that we deal with here on a regular basis.
Nothing sexy.
It isn't sexy. It's not, for anybody that thinks that working on a weight vest is somehow tactical. There's no weight vest training in this gym. Like, that gets done outside, right? Like, they're not, I could be wrong about that, but the bottom, I guess what I'm trying to get across is, like, people aren't going in there doing Metcons with,
burpees and weight vests.
No, that might happen in the programming somewhere down the line. I don't know, but this is really about building those base levels to advanced levels of strength, conditioning and power, so that you can perform at the top level in a lot of different ways. So yeah, we covered some basics, real basic stuff. It was interesting, but his delivery of that and how he ties it into what you're going to be doing on a regular basis as a quote unquote tactical athlete is where that's the nuance. And that's where the connections are being made for the guys out there on the, that we're really taking this in. And again, more specifically, I think for the current candidates that were there, God, they were soaking it up. I mean, these are young people that are just being influenced the right way with, this is proper movement. Don't load a shitty movement pattern, right? We squat. This is how we squat. This is why we squat. This is what you want it to look like. Yes, there's nuance in it, but we're not putting any more weight on that bar until this looks right. Like, there was a process to everything that he was putting forward.
Talked about mobility as well, right?
Tons of that.
3 ranges of motion. Do you want to go ahead and talk about Shelton too?
Yeah. So on day 2. Yeah, it was day 2. There was another individual that showed up, Shelton Stevens, 13 bar performance on Instagram. It's kind of a side gig for him. Shelton has an interesting background, again, as a strength and conditioning coach, came up through the universities and institutions, wound himself up as the head strength and conditioning coach at a university near, out there on the East Coast. In his own words, wound up, moon, sun, and stars, wound up at the right place at the right time, gets tapped, and then winds up at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, coaching the elite of the elite in the Army. And most specifically for those people that nerd out on that stuff, he is the guy that coaches the Delta team. The Delta team is the team, right? So when the shit goes down that you don't know about, in the dark of night, out in the middle of nowhere, and things like that, these are some of the guys that get called in right away to go do that. He's a private contractor, which is interesting. This is not a guy that came from the quote unquote operational space, right? He was tapped, which I think is really, really telling, because this is almost impossible to do. They're almost always taking people from the inside. He's a young guy, again, going back to intensity and drive and commitment and all of those things. He's a presence in and of himself. And he gets to see the elite of the elite on a daily basis. The guys at the other end of the spectrum, they've been through the selection process or currently going through the post-initiation of that process. Average age of guys on the, in the unit is 32 years old. So these are still young men, but these are matured guys that have come through, a lot of things. So, when we got into the mixture of both what Jeff was providing and what Shelton was providing was awesome for me, because again, it still was basics. There were a lot of things that came up. There were a lot of questions being asked by the participants that were there. I was just sort of being a sponge, and we kind of broken up into 2 groups, which is usually what happens at these things. This is getting demoed over here. This is getting demoed and explained over here. And then you switch groups. I was like shuttling back and forth.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, to get the things, get all the little tidbits, and figure out the tricks and the secrets.
Yep, that. But then the side conversations as far as, Shelton's approach with his programming for his guys. I thought that was fascinating as well. So really valuable. Really valuable.
Yeah, I just said like the tricks and the secrets, there are none. There are zero tricks and secrets to any of this. It really is the foundational stuff and your level of knowledge on that and the application of that to the person that's standing in front of you.
Oh, the application, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. You want to talk about some of the takeaways, like the little things that he's doing or some of the things that he was doing? You were listening to the side conversations. Was there anything
Shelton?
That
just as far as, his programming for the guys that he's working with, that it's not a linear program. It's undulating because of, at any time, a certain group of individuals can get, I think the term spun up for duty. So, when he's working with them, he doesn't necessarily have them go through a hypertrophy, high volume, heavy loads, because if they have to go out the next day, he doesn't want them to be incapacitated or sore, right? So, focusing on strength, focusing on power and quickness, again, like you had mentioned earlier, depending on what their job is, having them, be quick and reactive. So, I mean, again, going back to the exercises, he doesn't load them with the barbell. Yeah,
right? Specifically, there was no, like, he's not programming any barbell back squats.
Back squatting, right?
Which blew minds in that room, right?
But it makes sense.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they don't need to be doing that anymore.
Risk to reward, right?
Yeah, huge heavy deadlifting, barbell deadlifting from the floor. Like, what's the risk to reward ratio on that particular movement for these guys? And how does that apply? Like, are they deadlifting? Yes, but not necessarily with a barbell from the floor, right? Are they hinging? Absolutely they are, right? How are they doing that? It was the nuances, how these things are applied. A lot of the questions that came up too, and this is for those people that are in the space, and if you're an overachiever, or even if you're a coach, let's say if you're a coach, you can relate to this, and that is the overtraining aspect.
Yes.
And the misapplication of exercise programming in order to achieve specific results around conditioning. And so I think a lot of people, and I attribute a lot of this to the CrossFit world because of the Metcon piece, right? That is the part that people are the most fearful of, right? But they also understand it's so important to have, because those with the bigger engine, more specifically, those with the better power to weight ratio, output ratio, are the ones that win every time. So you can be the strongest and you can be the fastest and still not win. There is how long can you do those things for? And, what does your recovery system look like? And so I think
we talked a lot about, recovery system, but we talked about energy systems, right? Yeah.
How do you manage those? And really that was that was a big takeaway for me, is like, look, I manage training based on energy utilization and recovery. So that is how he is approaching, the systematic approach to training these guys. Now, that said, I think he said somewhere across the board is about 130 guys total that he's dealing with on a daily basis. That's not how many guys are in this particular unit that I mentioned before, but in general, these are these high-level, high-performing people which have very high demands on them that he has to program individually for, as well as a group. And he gets to see guys like just coming into the process or waiting to go to the next school where they're going to be really challenged. So he gets all kinds of different people that he gets to work with on a regular basis, and he's challenged with all of them as individuals, specifically around, I got to run.
Yeah.
I got to have this engine.
I heard that conversation multiple times.
The kids were asking
as far as, so when do I do my running, and him having to explain, when you're in a hypertrophy set or hypertrophy phase, you're not doing your running. You're not doing your long distance running because it's counterproductive.
Yeah, it's like, if you're in a hypertrophy phase, why are you going out and doing
miles on miles?
Miles on miles, and it's just dumb. Like, well, what are we trying to get better at? What is the goal? And again, so going back, like just working with people in the gym, if you're a coach that's working with the mainstream public, this can oftentimes be a real challenge to, around your clients. Like, I think you should be doing the Orange Theory a little bit less. but I want to lose weight. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to do a little bit less of that, and let's concentrate more on the hypertrophy and or your caloric expenditure throughout the day through lower intensity exercise.
Mm-hmm.
We can save maybe the cardio stuff for a little bit later,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to run a 10K in 2 months. Well, then we shouldn't be worried about fat loss.
And Jeff was talking about as far as sometimes less is more. I remember him talking about to a side group about having some athletes, and I think they were triathletes, or maybe it was a sister-in-law or something like that, but having her running less and the maximum amount that she ran versus what she thought she needed to run or what she's run in the past, and how her performance had really spiked with that. Less is more.
Yeah, you're talking about like peak and tapers, and knowing how to program that for the individual based on data, like what's coming back at you, not what feels good. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of data collection that goes into this process. But again, for those strength and conditioning folks out there, or people that are really, really nerd out on programming, this was great for a couple of reasons. One, because again, it validated the basics and the foundations. Like, look, it's still human performance. Like, these are still human beings. Yes, they may have certain things they need to worry about. I mean, one of the things that without giving away everything that Shelton was talking about, because I couldn't possibly do that anyway, but, we were talking about overhead movement. And that's been lately, Jeff has been talking a lot about that publicly because of the selection process, that you're overhead a lot. I mean, if you've seen any of these things, even if you've not been involved in this, like, watch a documentary, watch even a movie that involves Navy SEALs or, some, Rangers that are training or whatever. They got to hold these fucking even the PJs, they got to hold these fucking logs over their heads or boats over their heads or whatever. It goes further than that too. They have like, they wear helmets and they have, heavy equipment that they're dealing with, but he's prepping you to be ready for this. Well, once you've gone through that, right? And then you spend, half your career wearing heavy loads on your shoulders and rucking and, being in these, basically shrug, shoulder elevated and protracted positions, like, you're going to lose shoulder mobility. It's just what's going to happen. And one of the things he said very outright was like, I just don't take these guys overhead anymore.
Shelton said that.
Yeah. And again, there was nuance to this and we talked about the specifics, but they just don't have it. And so why is he going to program this? If one, they don't have it. Two, they're probably not going to do the homework to get it. Three, what's the risk to reward? Exactly. And four, does this really matter for this guy's job?
Where they are at that time.
Where they are at that point, right? So those are some of the little nuggets that got taken away. And so again, like, these are not perfect humans, right? These are high performing humans that they're designing programming around to help them be as efficient and effective as they possibly can in the amount of time they have to do it in for the specific job or goal that they need to perform. It's just like training a client, at Red Dot Fitness or whatever else. Obviously, it's different, but the same. So there's a lot of that. Again, going back to the conditioning piece, a lot of times it's hard to dial somebody back, and they're constantly playing in this 80%. You want to be able to perform at your 80%, but that doesn't mean you train in your 80% all the time. That being, for those people that don't get that, it's like, hey, you want to be able to push and stay at your 80% for as long as you can, knowing that staying there over time, your performance and return on that is going to diminish. Just because you want to stay there and that's where you want to operate, no pun intended, that doesn't mean you train there all the time. There was a lot of talk around zone 1, zone 2, thresholds. And there was a lot of talk around, zone 5 and 6 and, thresholds. So, how do you get the most out of each? Get pretty scientific with this stuff. And then there's also an art to it. And I think that was the bigger takeaways when we were talking with those guys, was the art in the training and the coaching about how to, toggle a switch or twist a dial to get what you need out of your athlete. And then ultimately, some of those things, if they're not listening, because they're challenged as coaches, just like anybody else, or, Shelton specific was saying, like, I'm challenged with, just as much as, like, I don't want this guy to run, but fuck, he's got an emotional attachment to that running right now for whatever reason. He thinks he's fat. He thinks he's slow. So, going back to the nutrition, like, this guy, Susan said, this fucking guy wants to eat keto right now before he's about to be deployed. Like, this might not be a good idea for you. How do you twist those dials, or toggle switches or get inside, the head of your client or your person in order to help them understand from an educational perspective how to do that well, or why that idea might not be a great one now. Let's take a look at how to do this better. It's the same challenges any coach is faced with, or any parent for that matter is faced with when they're parenting their kid. It's like, how do you find that balance? So again, I encourage you to go check out Shelton Stevens at 13 Bar Performance. I was trying, like, I even said to him, dude, I'm sorry to be such an ankle biter, but I was trying to get him on an interview with him while we were there. The time was just too tight. You can imagine.
Too compact, yeah. A lot going on.
It was bell to bell at this thing. And for him, he was getting in and out. He had his family, he was juggling and whatever else. And the guy works a ton anyway. So hoping to get Shelton on the show at some point. You guys can hear, from the horse's mouth, some of the things he's doing. Is very open about it, to the extent that he can be. And he's great to listen to. He's a fun guy. All right, so that was kind of the weights and bars piece, if you will. On that and the running piece, there was so much there. It was rich, and you can, if you follow Jeff at Jeff CSCS on Instagram, every day he's posting long form videos for you to pick up, and you'll get it like right away. You'll understand what kind of a dude Jeff is and where he's coming from. He might not be for you. I'll just be honest. And I think he's, he would say, yep, I might not be for you. And he would be totally okay with that. But yeah, jump on there and you can see that stuff. And then he also has a subscription, part of it, side of his business, where if you want to get all of it, it's all available for you there, as well as his, as well as a lot of his programming. The last and most impactful pieces, I think, for the weekend were the psychological component and the mindfulness component, which is so often overlooked. Everybody's like, yeah, let's get the supplements. Let's talk about the, how many grams of protein, do I need? And, how much weight should I have on the bar when I squat or bench press? The psychologiable piece was mind-blowing. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Dr. Rebecca Ivory.
Yeah, Dr. Rebecca Ivory was outstanding, and has a very niche space that she's working in right now, in that she's working with what's referred to is guys from the teams that have what's called operator syndrome. And there's many components to operator syndrome. And this is something that can happen during and you can be impacted by very, very long after going
a lifetime, right?
Yeah,
afterward.
Yeah, going through this type of a career path and or a lifestyle, because that's what it ends up being for a long time. Everything from getting blown up to getting shot at to seeing things you shouldn't, most people don't have to see on a daily basis. There are a lot of components to this. There's environmental, there's psychological, physical components to this that can impact you. She actually wrote a thesis and was published on the work that she's done. She's done a lot of
publications, yeah.
And it very specifically, she'll tell you, with SEALs, active and inactive at this point, and retired at this point, to gather this data. And she's out of the University of Washington. She's also she's a faculty member there, and she does a lot of she does the road show. She does a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking. I found her to be extraordinarily professional, easy to listen to.
Oh, very easy.
High energy, and knowledgeable isn't the right word. I think
she's captivating in her presentation. As far as, what she has to say. I don't want to say eloquent, but because the topic is definitely not eloquent, but she knows how to speak to her audience, and she knows her audience.
I'd say she's real as fuck. I'd say she's real as fuck. She's not gonna...
And so her partner, her spouse, is an active operator still.
Naval aviator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but nonetheless, he's active, and so she's come from that world and understands it, and I think she's like team mom. When the unit goes away, she's in charge, of making sure all the communications happen across the board. For anybody in that space, they know there's like den mothers, and I think she's that person. in the space, but she knows exactly who her audience is. She knows how to speak to them, and she's spoken to people that have done things that most of us could never imagine and had to endure things that most of us can never imagine. But at the same time, there's a large part of the population that has had to, and it's not being addressed, or it's been, pushed under the rug, or definitely misdiagnosed, misunderstood.
She talked about that, yes.
I mean, there were so many takeaways from the mental health perspective. I mean, everything from physiological and physical changes that happen to the brain, and the neural pathways, and what that does to thought process, what that does to problem solving skills from a cognitive level, from an emotional perspective.
This physical as well.
To what you can and can't do, what you how perceptions change. Things that were very easy for you to do become very difficult for you to do, and you're unaware. Also, things that are part of when we start talking about post-traumatic stress, that there are parts of post-traumatic stress that make you a very effective operator. They keep you alive, right? Hypervigilance being one of those things. Your ability to respond to violence, your ability to think through it, your ability to deal with it, and or particularly not deal with it, even put it in a box. Those make you, some of those things are skills to some extent. But they can also, when not in that environment or not in that career path anymore, can lead to a lot of downstream issues that are unhealthy, and assimilating back, or transitioning out of that and trying to have quote unquote normal life, or coming back from different deployments and things. She talked in detail, and again based on research. And one of the things that I found very interesting with this is my biggest takeaway from her and how this research came out, because people may be listening like, yeah, this is just another head shrink out there that, needed a paper published or whatever else. She got approval to do something different, and it turned into this. And I believe she said when she started, there were going to be like 5 to 10 subjects. And by the time she was done, she had talked to nearly 100, because those guys had left and gone out to their buddies and said, dude, you got to talk to this lady. Because she was helping them to understand what their issues were. And that's the whole thing with this operator syndrome was that I was taking away is how misunderstood it is even by the guys that have it, or the people that have it. And it's not to take away from people that have post-traumatic stress or PTS or any of the other things associated with operator syndrome. There's a list of things. I'm going to go through it today. Follow Dr. Rebecca Ivory, the tactical psychiatrist, or tactical psychiatry. That is, she'll tell you all about it. She's the expert on this. But their unawareness of why things are happening for them in a way that they're happening, whether it's different than what it was before, or whether it's just more intense, or whether it's not, or anything. I mean, we're going everything from mood to sleep disturbance to sexual dysfunction to hormone dysregulation to all kinds of. I mean, you're talking brain injury, thought process, how your ability to file thoughts and access those things. There was so much to this, but my big takeaway was, in a world where getting mental health right is stigmatized in this space. And it happens with first responders all the time, and anybody that listens to this show on the other side of the house with regard to the After Dark stuff. If you don't have to go back very far. I've spent a lot of time talking with people in the first responder community about mental and emotional health. Huge advocate for getting these people all the resources they possibly can. There is a stigma attached to asking for help. It sends up red flags. It creates some level of distrust at times. You will be questioned in terms of your ability, and for that reason or those reasons, people just don't seek it out. They also feel like they're being weak by doing it. So when you start with 5, whatever it is, it was a very low number. It was less than 10. It was less than 10, whatever that participants to start. When you start with 5 of these tier 1 operators that operate in this space where it's like trust is a huge thing, and talking about your feelings is not a thing. It's just not. For them to go out and basically recruit, another 70, people to go to contact her to go through the study for her to gather these this information for me was like,
that's huge.
This chick's doing something right. So, so it wasn't just it's not just us that she was captivating to and, and real as fuck with. I think that in and of itself was a really great, I guess very telling for me. Now, she continues to do work. She wrote a paper, right? But there's all this other stuff that she's doing on a regular basis, and this is her life. So going back to being committed.
So yeah, I think
being intense and being focused, this is what she does. And it was pretty amazing.
I was gonna say, didn't she say that she had a private practice at one point, but then she realized that a lot of the stuff that she was doing was pro bono for these guys, and so she needed to make some money, and so the university setting was a place to where she could still continue her research and she could still help individuals in a practice, but yet she was still getting paid.
Yeah, so that was the thing. Yeah, this was like, again, when you go out to do these things, you can speak to this more. Maybe there's a grant that's issued, right, and you get to go to a grant writer. It's okay, we'll pay to do this study. When it's over, it's over. Money's gone. Eventually, you got to get a job. And private practice is a lot, where you start going down this. But now she's working in the institution where she gets to educate other people on this stuff while still being able to work with these guys, continue her research, yes, spread the word, hit the road, talk to young people, prepare them for, the things that they're going to need to be able to face and get the word out. And again, it's not just, her work is generally speaking very specifically with military operators. The information is very similar across the board. It can be, extrapolated across a lot of these other, through first responders as well. And they're, the topics were not general, or excuse me, were not just specific to these people. The research and a lot of the talk was, but, a lot of the things that come out of this are, they cross several, let's just call market segments. So encourage people to go check that out. She's fun to talk to. And, one of the things I said before, I gave her a hug on the way out the door. I was like, I got to come to Seattle. I got to get up here. I got to get up there and get you and Susan's in that area as well. Get them both on the show to talk through stuff. Yeah, really strong ladies. So that kind of set the tone, I think, for the next piece of this, because now you're understanding all the physical aspects, from deep physiology, gut health to brain health to, the tolls that's being taken on people's bodies from a physical perspective, and the workouts and the performance and all those other things. There's this whole other piece, and again, going back to our own acronym, EAT squared plus E, there's the sleep and stress management piece, and part of the stress management piece is being mindful and taking care of yourself. Katherine Grimm, Jeff's wife, was really led this part of the discussion, and there was a lot of back and forth during these 3 days, but she really led this discussion, and I think. The more you get into this and the more you practice and the more you hear, the more you see the results that you can have through a good mindfulness practice. In specific, she went through meditation. She went through some, the benefits, the features and benefits, I guess, if you will, of meditation, and how that's helping people and how that's helping people like heal their brains and their bodies at the same time. It's not fucking woo-woo. Right. And that's the thing. I think people are, oh no, here we go. We're getting into yoga, or we're getting into, this spirituality, crystals and, and talismans and stuff like that. Hey, it's different things for different people. But the bottom line is like that's not what we were doing. And it's not what we were talking about. We were talking about down regulating, right? And being and coming to grips with certain things so that you could address certain aspects of your life to help you, number one, be a better operator before you're an operator, right? Just be a better human being, right? And so for these young people that are in this program, they're learning how to take care of themselves from inside
out,
from the inside out, very early on, which is something that likely has to be introduced way after things have gone way down this other path. And the bottom line is like, what that road's going to look like now. Like if you're in that world, it doesn't treat your body very well. It doesn't treat your mind very well. And
Jeff was there.
Yeah.
Right? Firsthand experience.
Yeah. In Jeff's own words, this part saved his life, So, these guys are learning how to do this going through their day. And now again, these are just humans, right? And so there was so much that could be taken from there and applied to the general human out there. And in reality, that's where it started for most of the people in that room, particularly for Katherine. She's like, it's like, this was before the operator stuff, right? Or who she was specifically working. She's doing work on herself first, which is how people get into fitness or get into mental health or healthcare. A lot of times they face their own challenges, and they had this process of discovery. So she shares that and shared that. But the big takeaways were being able to understand what's going on inside your own head and inside your body, right? And specifically, let's just call it your soul. Like what's going on in there and how to be okay with that. Not my first rodeo, going through this, this stuff, but it was really nice to hear her take on it and how she gets to the population that they're dealing with. It was very refreshing, but going back, we're talking about commitment, intensity, focus, the specific people. This lady is a force to be reckoned with at a lot of levels. So when it's one thing to hear it. I'm gonna be careful about the way I say this. It's one thing to hear it from somebody that's wearing sandals, tie-dye, flowers in their hair, whatever else. That might sound really bad, but I've been in those situations too, and I got to be honest. Like I'm just like, I'm having a tough time taking you seriously right now. You're not a bad person, you really. I just can't relate to you.
I was just gonna say, you just can't relate to that person. I can't
relate to you, but when you're standing there talking to
somebody,
to somebody. The lady's built like a brick fucking shithouse. Like she'd jump on the pull-up bar and fucking do more pull-ups than I can, right? And at the same time, I'll call her, she is Jeff's handler.
I was going to say, she's real. Yeah. We asked some questions.
Go back to be real as fuck. Yeah. Like
she gave it right to us.
Yeah. She's giving it right to us, and she is like handling Jeff. And Jeff is a lot, man. Jeff is a lot. So, if she can handle that guy, I'm sure she can handle most humans on the planet in a lot of different ways. But she's also doing that from a place of love and caring, and you can feel that. And it's palpable. When you walk into the room, she's the boss, right? Around that place, and that's kind of what I was getting. She is Mama Bear. She handles her business, and in this particular realm, which is really what she's bringing to the table over these couple of days, the bottom line there was, I think, was very impactful for everybody in there, including myself. And it's stuff that people should spend more time doing. And if you get to a point in your career or in your life where you go through some type of therapy, which I think is good for everybody should go through this at some point for all kinds of reasons. If you go through this, meditation is going to be recommended as a self-care / treatment for helping yourself get through the problem, whatever it is for you, whatever that challenge is. So anyway, I guess that the point of that is like, this shit's legit. And I thought she did a really good job with it. And I was inspired, probably more than I've ever been inspired by any of my other experiences, to practice that more. Because I definitely haven't been doing it enough. I mean, there's things I need to practice more in my life on a daily basis, and you have to prioritize these things. Like, I need to do more dry fire. I need to do more cardio, right?
No.
I need to do a better job at setting my bedtime, right? Or, and those kind of things. Where does it fit in the mix? It needs to be in there, right?
And she talks about that too. She and Jeff both talked about as far as like, how do you prioritize it and figuring out your day. So just like you would with exercise or anything else, schedule it.
Yeah. Again, this is like, so for a lot of people listening, like,
and it doesn't have to be 30 minutes.
I've heard this before, and maybe you're right, and whatever. I'm telling you. So this is the point of this, and kind of, I think the point of this conversation today is, we were meeting with people that work with people at the tip of the spear in, military first responder operations that have to be very physical, ready at a moment's notice, very resilient. And that's really what you're building, is this resiliency. It's the same shit that every human on the face of the earth needs at some level. And oftentimes we don't start working on it until we've had an oh shit moment. Mm-hmm. And that oh shit moment, sometimes you can't return fully from. And so, and I guess what I want to do is try to encourage people to think about this in that compare and contrast. Like, yes, this is a much different population than you might be familiar with, comfortable with, or have any idea about. But you know what? It's fucking human beings. And we all need the same stuff. But if you're looking to perform in a specific place and time and have a very specific goal, then you go to very specific individuals, and that's what they do. But the concepts that they're bringing to the table are rooted in fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And for people that are reaching for pills, reaching for the next supplement, reaching for some secret, reaching for somebody else to do this shit for them to be healthier, and perform better for themselves, for their job, for their kids, for their family, their spouse, whatever it happens to be, you have to do the work. And it's rooted in foundations and fundamentals. It's really no different no matter where you are. And that was the most refreshing part about walking away from this. On the plane ride back, and was trying to process a lot of things. We've gone through a lot of stuff. It was very long, several days. I think that's the big takeaway.
I would agree. And the other takeaway for me was the fact that, yes, it's rooted in fundamentals. And yes, this is to help that group of individuals prepare for whatever it is that they're entering. But the other thing is, it's also giving them tools for when they are there and then life after. Yeah.
And when they may or may not have the bandwidth to deal with the things that they're facing immediately and later on down the road. Like, just being able to communicate what's going on was a huge part of this process. And if you don't understand it, it's very hard to communicate it. So, communicate it to your potential resources, communicate it to your partners, your family, how to do those things. It's the same for anybody, that's facing certain challenges, in life. But the more you understand it, the better off you're going to be in the long run, and so will the people around you. So I highly encourage you guys to check out those people. So we had Jeff at CSCS, Fitsol, that's Fitsol, that's Katherine Grimm.
Fitsol 22.
Yeah, there you go, Fitsol 22. That's Katherine Grimm. Check her out. Check out Tactical Psychiatry. I think it's tactical_psychiatry. That is Dr. Rebecca Ivory. Check out the Tactical Dietitian. That is Susan Lopez. She's amazing. Hope to have those two ladies on the show soon. And then last but not least, we had Shelton Stevens. He's out at Fort Bragg with the Delta team and the special operations out there. That is 13 Bar Performance at and don't 13 forget Bar. Tom. Correct, Tom
at Thorn. Pazdernick. Sorry, Tom.
So sorry, Tom. Well, I'm going to talk to that guy in a couple of days on the phone, and I will get this cleared up. I apologize. I'm sure it's not the first time he's heard it. But check him out at Thorn. That's THORNE. Thorn Research. They're amazing. Great company. And so amazing. I think, like I said, if things go well, we'll be onboarding them here to provide to folks. So thanks for having this conversation with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having it with me as well.
It was good to debrief it.
I think this is the first time that you and I've actually talked about it. Other people have asked me, and I'm like, I'm still processing and stuff like that. So this was really good.
Yeah, we didn't have. I mean, you flew out on a different flight than I did, and it's been bell to bell as per usual here. So I appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you.